Hello again. One of the problems with understanding the past is that we mostly draw our ideas about it from books, films, and television programs rather than non-fiction books or history lessons. If you think of working class people in Victorian London, your mind will drift unbidden towards the Artful Dodger, Bill Sikes, Nancy, and so on. Probably alongside images of the film Oliver. Talk of the Regency period, we think of Jane Austen and her world. Edwardian Britain, that's Downton Abbey and Upstairs Downstairs, or maybe the Forsyte Saga. Few of us want to go to the trouble of tracking down actual first-hand accounts of the time, or reading up old diaries and letters, or hunting out old photographs and paintings. What this means is that our picture of Britain's past is largely a fictional creation, and it's been formed by authors and actors and television producers and film directors. Dickens has had a great effect on our ideas of Victorian London. Some of the films that we've seen have a similar effect, creating the world of the Second World War. Think about things like Brief Encounter. That's why I find the recent trend alarming for television dramas to depict every period of the past in Britain as being populated by visible minorities. The result of this will be a generation of young people growing up and believing that an 18th century queen was black and that there were loads of black noblemen around as well. The latest thing of this kind is the remake of the Darling Buds of May, which is now being broadcast on the British television channel ITV as the Larkins. In the interest of viewers of this channel, I took the trouble to watch an episode of it the other day. The first televised version of Darling Buds of May was very popular in the 1990s, and it brought fame to Catherine Zeta-Jones, of course. It's generally regarded as something of a classic, something I don't think will be said of the Larkins, which is an attempt to recreate the popularity of the earlier series. There are two problems with the thing, one of which is likely to irritate white people and the other to offend black people. Something, in fact, to annoy most viewers, which might account for the low numbers of people who are watching it. The first thing which strikes anybody who sees this programme is that although it is set in the Kent countryside in the 1950s, the community shown is fully multicultural. There is a retired Indian soldier and his sister, the landlord of the pub is black, as is the tax inspector who visits the Larkins, and also the village school teacher. Various other people of colour are scattered throughout the scenes. All this gives the whole thing a surreal air. At that time there were very few black people or Indians in England, and those there were tended to live in big cities and towns. Even there, few black or Asian people were to be found. The thumbnail to this video shows the Tottenham Hotspur football team parading in triumph through the streets of Tottenham in 1961, following their winning of a trophy. Today, the population of Tottenham consists of almost nothing but visible minorities. Have a look at the photograph though. If you're using a laptop, you have a touch-sensitive screen, you can enlarge that picture and you will see there is not a single black person to be seen in the crowds surrounding that bus along Tottenham High Road. Tottenham was 100% white in those days, and that was just 60 years ago. I don't say this was better, merely that it was how things actually were. This is what makes the new Darling Buds of May and other similar dramas so peculiar. The sight of a countryside full of people of colour is so anachronistic that it serves as a constant distraction. Nobody remarks about the fact that the man running the pub is black, nor that an Indian soldier is marching around the village wearing his uniform. The intention behind this is of course fairly obvious. It's to make those watching it believe that England has always been a happy mixture of ethnicities and different cultures, and that everybody has always got on famously. Is there any harm in this sort of nonsense? One thing which irritates me is that young people watching this will subconsciously absorb the idea that this is how things really were in the years immediately following the end of the Second World War. That Indians and black people have always been part of the fabric of English life. Without realising it, their view of English history is being manipulated and distorted. As I said earlier, many of us, especially young people, will take their ideas about history from what they see in these programmes. A generation raised on these modern television programmes will picture the multicultural society as being part of the warp and weft of this country from time immemorial. They will accordingly be unable to understand the real nature of British history. This is the aspect of the thing which will annoy some white people. Many black people are likely to be not only annoyed but actually angered by this false portrayal of life in England 70 years ago. This is because racism is being erased. The truth is that the English countryside in the 1950s would have been a very hostile environment for black people and Indians. The idea that all the white people would have simply accepted a black landlord and school teacher without remark is absurd. There's an entire history of the struggle for acceptance faced by black people who came to this country in the 1950s and the prejudice which they faced. All this has been airbrushed from history in this new version of the Darling Buds of May. It shows all the white people simply accepting people of colour without even noticing the colour of their skins. I do assure people that in the 1950s, unacceptable racist slurs were the default setting for many people, and this was particularly the case in rural districts which didn't come into contact with many immigrants. Watching this new series, you might wonder what all the fuss about the Windrush generation is. There seems to be no racism or prejudice to be found anywhere there. Every historical drama these days on television, whether it's set during the Regency or Victorian London, or as in this case, Kent in the 1950s, is now like this. Black people and Asians are scattered around and their presence is simply taken for granted. Often they are police officers, doctors, teachers and other professionals, which makes the whole thing look even weirder. This ties in with efforts made to persuade us that Britain has always been a multicultural and diverse society, and that black people and Indians have played an important role in the nation since the time of the Romans. What we are seeing here is deliberate propaganda aimed at altering the past. I just want people to be aware of this process and to ask themselves if this is really what they want.